Gavin?
So, yep, me again. Item 10. This report presents an overview of the upcoming briefing papers that this committee is likely to need to consider during the calendar year of 2017. Caveat that with this paper, for now, only presents those likely briefing papers focusing on development and review of resource management policy matters. A second follow-up report of a similar nature will be coming to this committee focusing on the science reporting and science investigation work streams, but due to the science team's existing commitments, they haven't been able to write that report for the February meeting. So the committee's work program is largely, it is influenced by the broader council's work program. Council's work program and priorities are set out in the long-term plan and subsequent annual plans, plus also with some more finer resolution work programs on specific projects such as the tank plan change and the Mohaka plan change that this committee's previously dealt with. Taking that sort of information, staff have been able to develop something that looks like a bit of a Gantt chart, which is set out in attachment 2. So what that attachment 2 diagram attempts to paint is a picture of, down the left hand side, a number of items or projects and some key sub-tasks or sub-activities, and over towards the right hand side of that, setting out an approximate time frame of when a briefing paper will be brought to this committee sometime during 2017. Some of those items will be brought to this committee for information purposes only. That's our best guess, staff's best guess. And some other items will be brought to this committee for decisions, be it pause points, checking in, are we heading in the right direction, such as what Mr. Palmer alluded to around the oil and gas plan change project, or as some projects near their completion, a decision regarding adoption for public release of such and such a document. So method in my madness is that where the D is filled in, that indicates a decision item that is likely to occur in and around that timeline or time frame, whatever column it appears in. Where the D is hollow, we're indicating that a decision item is likely around that time, but not necessarily definitively in that month of the column it appears in. Similarly with the information or the I icons, where it's filled in, the timing is, we're fairly confident with the timing. Where it's hollow, there's a lot less certainty around that timing. Lack of certainty might be due to some external influences as well, or external drivers, particularly stuff that is that this committee will need to consider that emerges from central government. There's a number of national direction work streams. Some of those have been outlined in attachment 3 to this paper. A number of those this committee will need to grapple with in the next 12 months or so, either in terms of making submissions on proposals or considering the implications of any of these central government propositions once they're finalised. So this paper, again, is just for information purposes. It's an indicative calendar of activity as the policy planning team sees it for this committee. And again, I'm happy to take any questions of clarification or further exploration of what any of these line items might mean.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question on outstanding freshwater bodies. Has that piece of work that we partnered, I think, Auckland Council, has that been completed and what were the outcomes?
So the project was something that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Auckland Council and MFE partnered in. Large chunk of funding from Ministry for the Environment. That project looked at developing some criteria and a methodology for assessing outstanding freshwater bodies. It is all but complete. MFE are hosting a workshop with some key practitioners on Valentine's Day, of all days, to just sort of identify some next steps. And it seems timely that after that workshop, there'll certainly be some outputs from it, and we can report that through to, we're intending on reporting it through to the 1st of March Regional Planning Committee meeting as to our own next steps on how we might do a plan change for identifying outstanding water bodies in Hawke's Bay.
My question is about item row 2. Consider scope and terms for appeal on Environment Court decision on plan change on Regional Policy Statement 5. Could you just refresh me? What's the issue there? Is this the one, no degradation?
No.
What is this?
Plan change 5 was a change to the Regional Policy Statement that introduced a bunch of high-level policies around land and freshwater management. Part of that did deal with the issue of no degradation, but that Environment Court decision is done and dusted.
Right.
There are still some parts of an appeal by Fish and Game regarding the definition of what is or isn't a wetland. And so that, as outlined in one of the later reports on this agenda, that item is set to appear before the Environment Court in the coming months, but the court hasn't yet specified a date for that.
So that's the only outstanding issue of concern to us?
Yep. So this line item here is kind of a placeholder to say, depending on what the court's decision is around what is or isn't a wetland, we may or may not choose to take further challenges on that one.
Thanks, Chair. The Mohawker plan change, that seems an awfully tight time frame. Are we on track for that?
It is awfully tight, and with some of our other work priorities and whatnot, it is looming large as one of those projects that's having some momentum sucked from it. It's one of those things that we'll certainly have to reassess our work program to see whether it can fit within budgets, resourcing, and our other priorities that staff are faced with at this point in time. But yeah, it's certainly timely for a bit of a reality check around that.
Chair, perhaps if I could add, we do have a scheduled meeting in March with key stakeholders in the catchment, and one of the things we want to test with them is their aspirations in respect of a timetable. It may well be that the community is not in as much of a hurry as we are here in terms of this timetable, or that they feel like they're going to need a bit more time. If the community is willing to take a bit more time on it, then we would be very happy to. As Gavin said, we've got some staffing constraints around progressing this alongside other things such as tank, and frankly I'm actually running out of budget because some of the tank work is costing us more than anticipated, so deferring this the substantive work to the second half of this year and then flowing to next year would work better for us. But look, we want to have that conversation with the community and get some agreement around that before making unilateral decisions, if you like.
Thanks again, Gavin, for that. And it's like we see through those items, number 10, it's a heavy program, you know, for all the staff and ourselves. Just around the Mohawker plan change and the stakeholders in the reference group, my concern around it is the lower end of the catchment, with due respect with Toro and Ngāti Pahawera. They are huge developers in farming, moving into the future, and they're doing very well in what they're doing, but I don't see any engagement lower on down the catchment where the Mohawker end is. And also, we always talk about stakeholder reference groups, and I got a lot of respect for those guys because myself as a farmer, okay, that's a main part of our income, but the part is with engagement early on with tangata whenua is it must be a must on any plan change moving forward. We end up engaging when we're halfway down on any plan change. So my reason behind it if tangata whenua groups or tangata whenua or hapu and iwi around the area are engaged earlier on in the part and feel welcome in the work stream moving forward, we must have engagement early on in the process and making sure when any of the plan changes moving forward, there's consistency around finance, i.e. we see the tanker and how much that's costing us as council, but we don't want to be seeing, a plan change prioritised with tuki happening and the amount of the money gets sucked up in some other area, then we only get left pittance in the other plan changes. I like to see consistency and engagement early on in the stage. Kia ora.
Chair, sorry, could I just perhaps comment just on the engagement with tangata whenua? So the project proposal for a Mohaka plan change that we brought before this committee in the latter part of last year included the proposal for a tangata whenua advisory group to help the council with engagement with tangata whenua for the entirety of the catchment, including the lower reaches. I understand that the tangata whenua members of the Regional Planning Committee have also had a discussion about a subgroup being established of this committee to work on Mohaka. And so one of the things we need to reconcile is whether that group would replace a community or a tangata whenua advisory group, or whether we'd have both, and what's the interaction between the two of them. So that remains a bit of a work in progress at the moment, and when we come back with a more detailed project plan around Mohaka, we'll certainly reflect that. But if I could assure Mr Smith that it is our intention to engage with tangata whenua the length and breadth of the catchment early, and that to be substantially resourced. And I guess I share the concern that we don't under-resource this process, and given that the council's resources are finite, and given that tank is earlier in the queue and is a significant focus right now, then ensuring that this is adequately resourced may mean that we have to delay in delivering the Mohaka plan change on our current timetables. I think we've got a recurring theme here within council at the moment of perhaps biting off a little bit more than we can chew, and then finding that timelines push out a little bit, and that goes to perhaps overly optimistic assumptions about how much is achievable by when. We do have until 2025 under the National Policy Statement to complete the plan change, so we do have time up our sleeve, but we obviously need to keep making progress.
Tanya?
I do, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, my question's along the lines of capacity, something we were talking about in tangata whenua yesterday. And I guess it's a question for the Chief Executive, whether we have, as council, sufficient capacity to undertake all the 4 projects, being those listed in the long-term plan and the annual plan. And I agree with Alan that the list we've got here in attachment 2 is very lengthy, and some of these timeframes look quite tight. I'd just like some clarity. Do we have capacity to do all the things that are on the list? And if we don't, how are we going to deal with that?
Very good question, Tanya. I think it was directed at me, but I'll be happy to defer and delegate a bit of the answer to other members of the team. But my view is that if I start with the NPS of fresh water and the obligations in it, not only in the plan process, the plan development process, but then in the implementation. Frankly, I think the trend is to ever-increasing expectation that we're going to get the stuff sorted quickly, with a plan frame system that doesn't work that way first. It just doesn't work that way. And the second thing is, when it comes to the implementation side, I'm concerned that then this is a nationwide issue actually, that the system's setting up some unrealistic expectations about how much will get done, by whom, by when, with the burden largely falling on the regional councils. So that's a problem very macro level answer to the problem that we have. The second issue is that inevitably there's going to have to be some really hardcore focus on resource, and rather focus on the absolute priorities, the compelling priorities, and what isn't a compelling priority. And I think that's where the council's going to have to get itself through this LTP quickly, and that's going to mean some stuff is not going to get done. Right. So the council. So Tony, I should also say that clearly, when it comes to plan processes and the RMA processes, that's a joint plan committee issue. But yeah, unrealistic expectations, too much on the agenda, both in the plan development process and well as the implementation process. So there's a serious conversation coming.
Right, may I just have a follow-up question then?
Sorry, I wasn't looking at you there, Tony. I was looking that way. So
My follow-up question then is, if prioritising is going to be the key issue, we're hearing about the strain on resources. I'm pleased to hear the recognition that in terms of the RMA training policies, it comes back to this growth. But I'm not clear how we determine our priorities in this growth for the wish list that we've got of all the many things that councillors and Huntington General want to progress. So I can see the indicative calendar here, but I'm already hearing about the Mohaka plan change possibly needing to be pushed out to the second half of the year to accommodate. I didn't quite catch what was accommodating, but I do think we need some methodology within this group to clearly understand what's on the wish list and how is it being prioritised, because I think it's this group that prioritises it.
So Tanya, we're doing this at the moment somewhat iteratively. Of course, we've got the macro planning processes of council, both annual plan and long-term plan, and what sits in here largely is driven by what was in the long-term plan. So that's budgeted, programmed, but then we've had, things you can take. There's one or two examples here, I guess. A water conservation order, for example, that's something that sort of comes along unplanned, unbudgeted, that has a knock-on effect. The annual plan process that's coming up will be an opportunity to just take stock of some of this. We don't have a process around this table to identify priorities in one fell swoop. As I say, it's kind of iterative. So when we come back, for example, with advice on Mohaka, that advice will include the resource implications, the overall workload, and whether or not we recommend there be a deferral. But I recognise that as taking issue by issue in isolation and not looking at it as an entire package. So today was a good opportunity for us to put the whole picture on the table and to get any feedback. And I appreciate the paper hasn't been drafted in a way to sort of provide a structured conversation around that. But we would welcome any feedback today on priorities, or if your preference is that at perhaps the next meeting or some point over the next few months, we have a dedicated item and some supported discussion around what the priorities should be. We'd be more than happy to do that as well. So really take your guidance as our governors on that.
Mr. Chairman, can I suggest that needs a process and not just ad hoc comments from individual members as to what their priorities may be? And I'm sure you can devise a process whereby democratically and with full involvement of all members, we can establish priorities. That's how I believe it should be anyway.
Chair. I agree absolutely with Councillor. So Chair, on that, can I suggest the next meeting on the 1st of March, as you will have seen from the timeline, has quite a lot of work coming forward. It's going to be a busy meeting. As Gavin said, this work program doesn't include all the science reporting that comes as well. I'll need to go away and consult Paul Drury in terms of aligning with the annual plan cycle, but it's probable that perhaps the April meeting would be the right time in terms of where we're at with annual plan finalised or annual plan consultation, etc., to have the conversation with you about about priorities. So just indicatively, I'd say perhaps not the next meeting, but the meeting after, 5th of April, for that conversation. But I'll come back and confirm.
Okay, can someone move the recommendation, please? Seconder. Councillor Bevan. All in favour? Thank you. Statutory advocacy. Oh, no, number 11, sorry. No, we've done it, yeah.